Hi there, and welcome to Parental Burnout, finding a way to connect and care for yourself. I am the instructor, Dr. Asharina Reem, and my guess is you already know that since you probably got this through my email. I want to talk about parental burnout, and you may have already downloaded the handout that was accompanying this course. What I want to tell you is that I talk a little bit about self-compassion in the handout. I'll talk about that some more as the weeks progress. But I'm going to talk about particular points in this course that are a bit different. And one thing I want to tell you is that parental burnout and the study of parental burnout came to be because researchers were investigating burnout related to the workforce. And what they found is that parents were experiencing this, tenfold or just as much because we are exhausted. Our jobs are grueling and intense, and we often don't take the breaks that we need. So, I will be sharing some pieces from research and some actionable tips. So, what is parental burnout? It is a specific syndrome resulting from enduring exposure to chronic parenting stress. Now, all of you are raising your hands and saying, oh my gosh, this is me, right? I've experienced chronic parenting stress. Yes, right? Do you have it? What we are looking at are three things: overwhelming exhaustion, and this is related to your parenting role, emotional distancing, and this is that we kind of feel disconnected. It doesn't mean that we don't love our children, it just means that we are so worn down that we can't give emotionally like we want to. We're not responding in a loving or gentle way all the time because we are so worn down. And then the third thing being that we have a sense of ineffectiveness in our role. We feel like we're not doing it good enough. We feel like we are not giving our all in these particular areas of parenting. And these three risk factors, the first being traits of the parent, and this is if you have a tendency to be anxious or depressed or self doubting. And I even find perfectionism as a risk factor because there's this push to want to do everything, just a certain way and wanting to have control in every area. And when we become parents, that is really unrealistic and very unhelpful and can lead to burnout quite quickly. The next being parenting factors. And these are a couple of things. So this is that transition to motherhood that I'll be talking in great detail about in my upcoming e-course, Keeping Mommy in Mind. And that is that idea of I have like maybe a loss of myself or my freedom, and I'm really having a hard time navigating who I am, and I'm kind of grieving who I used to be in a sense because there are some parts of that person I really miss. And the third risk factor being just how your family functions. If you are in a partnership, how are you and your partner getting along? Are you satisfied with the quality of your relationship? Are you in agreement with parenting decisions and how you run your household and how you divvy up responsibilities? Or is your home environment just pure chaos? And I don't mean like after dinner, it's loud in our house and we've got a lot going on. I mean, just sheer chaos, like nothing is functioning in with any semblance of routine. So enough about what it is and what maybe predicts it, but I want to talk a little bit about how you can make it better. There are 5 steps that I have spelled out here, and I will not be able to go over all of them. Otherwise, this course would be very long. I'm going to be talking about how you can increase self-compassion as the weeks progress. The second step being developing good child rearing practices. This would take far more than a short e-course. So I'm going to have to actually skip over this one for the time being. Step 3 is creating time for leisure. I will talk about that today. Step 4 is cultivating positive co-parenting. The dynamics of our relationships shift so much after we become parents. I have spent a great deal of time going over that dynamic in my upcoming course, Keeping Mommy in Mind. I actually have an entire module set aside for couples to watch together and do the work together. Step 5 is how we set up external supports, and I will talk about that briefly in this course today. And again, I dive really deep into this in Keeping Mommy in Mind. And if you don't know about that and you want to know more, just keep your eyes peeled in your email because I will be sharing more about that. So this idea of time for leisure, we just said that that was something that could potentially help parental burnout. What is that? And I know that people chuckle at this, but time free from work or duties. And you're thinking like, I'm a mom. What do you mean? Time free from work or duties? But this is so needed. We really do need to be taking those breaks. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this. So we think of self-care and we think about those Instagram moms, maybe we do, or maybe I just do, that are sitting in a bathtub with bubbles and a glass of wine or champagne. And they've got like, I don't know, just the ambiance of pure relaxation. And to me, what I think of on the list to the left are some of those ideas of what self-care used to look like when I was not a mom. And maybe I would go get a massage or a manicure or go, spend a day at a spa, which I didn't do frequently, but these are just ideas, going out with your friends, spending a weekend away, shopping, candlelit baths, yoga, reading books, cleaning, all of the above, right? And I'm not saying that you can't do these things now and they can't be a part of your self-care rituals, but what I'm saying is when we become parents, it is harder to do these things, right? Because they take time to schedule and work out. It also might not be feasible with our resources and all of the above, right? So what I want you to start thinking about is how you can nourish yourself, how you can care for yourself alternatively. And it doesn't mean that it's going to, be less impactful. These things might actually be just as impactful, if not more, because they're teaching you specific practices to engage in daily. So sitting outside for 10 minutes, you don't understand what the sun, if you live in a sunny environment, can do for you and your levels of vitamin D in just 10 minutes daily. Saying yes or saying no, eating nourishing foods, calling a friend. This is going to be part of one of the levels of support that we talk about in keeping mommy in mind. Listening to music, stretching, cuddling, which releases oxytocin. You'll learn a little bit more about that in the handout. Going to bed early, not putting yourself down, and watching something funny, which is what I did in those initial probably 90 days postpartum. I think I ran through every single Netflix comedy because it's exactly what I needed to keep myself laughing and feeling good. Self-care it is not just an act of doing. So the previous screen, I was talking about all the things that you can do, right? And sometimes self-care is setting boundaries with people and saying, you know what, no, I am not going to take your call, or no, I am not going to have to deal with what you're telling me, and I'm not going to take that feedback. Sometimes it's setting boundaries with our time and saying, I'm not going to spend all this time doing whatever it is that's stressing you out. And sometimes it's setting a boundary with ourselves. And that is the quality of our thoughts and what we allow ourselves to think and what we are entertaining in our brain. And again, in keeping mommy in mind, I'm going to go so deep into the quality of our thoughts in teaching evidence-based therapy skills about challenging those thought processes. And lastly, that you're no longer putting emphasis on what others think. And you see all of these inspiring quotes floating around social media and the internet, and it kind of talks about like if they're not paying your bills, then their, ideas shouldn't matter. And I know it's easier said than done, but really challenging, like why am I taking on someone else's thoughts or views about my life? How are they contributing to my life? Are they going to be living in my life through the rest of eternity, right? So we'll talk a bit more about this. There are several barriers to self-care. These are the things I hear every day, and I actually recently sent out an email asking moms what their biggest struggle was, and they said that they just don't have time to care for themselves, they don't have the resources, they don't deserve a break. I get that a lot from working moms, and maybe they haven't worked hard enough, like their house is a mess, so how can they take care of themselves, or I feel so much guilt about taking care of myself. There are a lot of barriers that we create cognitively or in our thoughts that say, I don't need it, I can't, I don't deserve it, or I just can't bring myself to do it. And I challenge moms all the time to be more creative. And I understand this as a mom who moved across the country to go to graduate school and start a family with limited support. So I recognize why and how we need to take just some steps to be creative. And I always talk about like the use of technology. So technology is a skill. I mean, it's a tool. And sometimes we can use that and say, and for like older kiddos, but saying, I'm going to have my kid, watch something while I need to do something to nourish myself. And that's okay. That might not be popular opinion, but I am telling you that we talk about exposure. We're either going to expose our kids to an overstressed, overworked, and really overwhelmed mom, or we're going to take the steps necessary to do something that's a little creative or not what we expected to take care of ourselves so that we can be present, we can respond, and we can be the moms that we need to be. I talk a lot about finding resources in your community. And again, we'll talk about this in the course, Keeping Mommy in Mind. But our local grocery store has a daycare. So I always tell moms to maybe do something like that while you're grocery shopping. And they also conveniently have, coffee shops in there to really make things a bit easier. Looking at your local fitness facilities to drop your kids off. So many moms I meet with do that and actually don't even always work out. They might take a shower, get themselves ready for the day, or even just sit down and read a book, relax, sit in the sauna, you name it. So it's about creativity and it's about being bold and asking for help. And we will go over that in just a bit. So, what are the risks of avoiding breaks? Because so many moms are not taking breaks. And I wanted to bring up a research study. They were looking at parental burnout, and they wanted to go back to this research study from a large engineering company. They studied over 3 years. They wanted to look at their accidents that occurred in the workplace, and that was due to a lack of breaks. So this puts you at risk for accidents in the workplace. So imagine the kind of risk it puts in our household when we're not managing to take care of our needs. It's very important and it's necessary. So I want to have you do an exercise. And I will have a ton of exercises in the launch of this course that I'm talking about because I love tangible things that we can do to make our lives better. The first exercise is what I call a different kind of before and after. So I want you to create a list of leisure self-care activities, write them all down, make a catalog of them. Things that you do now that you used to do before, things that you want to do that you've never done. And I want you to start doing some of those things, however simple or however big they are. And I want you to just document the way that you felt before you did the activity. And I want you to start doing a little bit of reflection on how you felt after, how you respond to your children after, and how just your behavior has changed since engaging in that activity. Because we want to see how effective it is. And when we have that kind of data, it really drives us to continue doing those things that we need to do because it's beneficial and it's helpful. So external supports, this might not be much of a surprise to you, but a 2011 study in social networks found that we have fewer intimate relationships than we used to. And then the researcher, Dr. Matthew Brashears, was quoted saying we should be less concerned about social isolation or lacking any social contact, and more concerned about social poverty or not having adequate support. So what this is suggesting is that we have friends, but we don't feel like we can confide in them, or we don't feel like they can truly support us because that level of intimacy is lacking, because so many of the friendships today are kind of superficial, right? They don't go deeper than really connecting on a digital platform, so to speak. And that's not always a bad thing because those can be very helpful, but sometimes we need to dig a little deeper. I talk about the 4 kinds of supports in Keeping Mommy in Mind, and I even go over what we call the social circle strategy, where we go step by step and talk about how we can really build that network of supporters in our lives because it's extremely important. So in 2015, a study published in Human Nature found that to maintain friendships, women need to talk to each other and often. I mean, this is kind of sounds silly, right? Like that's not rocket science. We need to be talking to each other and we need to do it often, but we don't. And we always say this when we, run into friends. We'll say, we should really get together sometime. Let's catch up. Seriously, I'm going to call you. We should get together. And it never happens, right? So we tend to zone out online and, scrolling through, looking at pictures of what other people are doing without forging real connection. And it would be one thing to connect with moms virtually and really develop a connection with them and support one another versus just being there as kind of an observer sitting on the sideline. So, how do we connect? And this is also going to seem very strange and silly because here I am telling you how to make friends or how to sustain relationships. But what research has found is that we need to nurture our friendships. What does this mean? This means we need to connect, we need to call, we need to connect, we need to invite, we need to get to know the parents of your kids' friends, or ask someone to join you when you're doing something for yourself. So like if you are going out to get a pedicure, have someone come along. Try to see if you're doing anything. Do you want to come along with me to do this activity? Maybe you start to find a new interest. This doesn't have to be something fancy. I don't expect you to take up a whole new, career in blogging, but I'm saying just looking into new activities of interest. Maybe there's a book club in your community. Maybe your neighborhood community is getting together to do stuff. Whatever it is, start just being curious about what's going on in and around you. Join a community for moms. I talk greatly about this again in the course, but ask around, ask what other moms are doing for themselves, and try to also look for something like that in your community. The last thing I say is get to know your neighbors. I realize that people are not as connected with their neighbors or people in their community, and we are often rushing into our home, closing our garage behind us if we have a garage, or shutting the door and just want to be left alone. And I get that, especially if that's something that you need to really recharge. But take a step away from doing that for a moment and be the person that says hello or smiles at the people in your community and maybe ask a question. And if you're one of those people that is content with your support system, like you have a rock star support system, maybe it's time that you be the support person for somebody in your life. Maybe you reach out to that mom that is in the trenches or doesn't have what you might have in your family or friend circle, and reach out to see how she's doing and what her needs are, or if she wants to just get together at the park or at one of your homes. This is another exercise that I want you to work on. This is a challenge for the week. So I want you to connect with somebody. I want you to reach out to a friend from either your past or someone you've fallen out with, or someone you've only recently met, and call her. Don't text, don't email, don't wave, call her and ask her to hang out. There's so much intimacy that can be built when we talk to people on the phone or when we talk to them in person. So if there's somebody in your life that you can do this with, that you can catch up with, it will serve you well, and I challenge you to do that. And lastly, I want you to do something daily. I want you to ask yourself this one question: how can I be a better friend to myself? This is something that I do for my own, like for myself, and then for all of the people that I meet with. I tell them that we need to befriend ourselves. We live with ourselves all day, every day, and it's so important for us to like that person. And if we can't like ourselves and develop a good friendship with ourselves, then we're really going to struggle to develop friendships with those around us. So this is my challenge, and that's what I leave you with. That's all I have for you today, and I hope to see you in Keeping Mommy in Mind, where I will dive deeper into such important topics, but I'll also create a virtual community where my hope is that all of you connect with one another, and I will also be involved in that. So if you didn't know this, I actually will be like the admin or the moderator of the virtual support community, and I'll be answering questions and hopefully providing more meaningful information. I hope you enjoyed this.